Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? Because to them, she was just the woman in the booth, the quiet one who signed range logs and kept to herself. Not part of their unit, not part of their world. But today, that illusion was about to break. The Nevada sun was cruel, baking the earth and the men who stood on it. Heat shimmered like a veil over the desert firing range as SEAL Team 7 fought against the wind, the heat, and their own growing frustration. Even the best trained operators were missing. Dust clung to their gear. Tempers started to fray. Petty Officer Rodriguez cursed under his breath. Winds bouncing 20 knots now feels like threading a needle in a hurricane. The others laughed, half at him, half at the absurdity of it all. Except one. She stood behind glass, still and silent, watching. Lena Gray had been working the Fallon Naval Air Station range for 8 months now. Routine, invisible. That was her goal. Punch in, punch out, nothing more. No attachments, no questions. But something in the way the men struggled stirred something she thought she'd buried. Their professionalism. Their disappointment in themselves. It reminded her of another time, another life, when Rodriguez gestured toward her and joked, "Maybe we should ask the range lady for tips." The rest chuckled. But Morrison, the team's commander, turned. To look at her, really look. Something shifted in the air. She stepped out from the booth, calm, deliberate, like the decision had already been made. "The wind's not your enemy," she said quietly. But the words cut through the wind and sunburnt. "Silence. You're fighting it." Instead of listening, Morrison raised an eyebrow. Her voice was calm, but there was something else beneath it. Experience, command. "Is that so?" She nodded toward Rodriguez's rifle. "Mind if I show you?" The team exchanged glances. Part amusement, part curiosity. Rodriguez handed over the weapon without hesitation. Lena didn't hesitate either. She checked the bolt, tested the trigger pull, dialed in the scope. Every motion clean. Confident, not showy, not hesitant, just second nature. And then she did something that made the men fall quiet. She walked right past the 600-yard mark to 800. No one had touched that range all day. She lay down, still, breathing slow, listening, watching. The wind flags danced and snapped. Like warnings, a lesser shooter would have hesitated, but Lena didn't flinch. She adjusted the scope with small, exacting movements, waited for the lull, waited for silence. Then she squeezed the trigger. Crack! The sound of the shot echoed across the desert, bouncing off the rocks and the stunned silence of the SEALs behind her. Clang! The steel target at 800 yards rang like a bell. Dead center. Rodriguez let out a whisper that didn't quite carry words. Morrison just stared. Lena rose, handed the rifle back, and simply said, "The wind tells you everything you need to know, if you listen." Then she turned, walked away, and vanished back into her booth like nothing happened. But Morrison didn't move. Something had changed. He couldn't explain it yet. But he felt it. Later that night, long after the sun had dipped behind the mountain ridges and the base was quiet, Morrison sat at his desk, bathed in the cold glow of his laptop screen. Routine background check. That's all it was supposed to be. But what he found made his skin crawl. Lena Gray wasn't just quiet. She was a ghost. Her employment file was paper thin. Previous employers? Shell companies, military service, Army Reserve, supposedly. But the record was redacted, entire sections blacked out, even her deployment history. Gone. What was she hiding? He ran her fingerprints lifted subtly from a coffee mug she left behind. No match. Not just no match to her name. No match in any federal database. Not even MEPS, the database every U.S. service member had to be in. That wasn't a miss. That was a wipe. Someone with clearance had scrubbed her identity. And then came the security footage. Morrison leaned forward as the footage ran on screen. She arrived every day at 0630. But she never left. Not once in the past 30 days. It was impossible. Or it should have been. The next morning, Morrison was waiting at the gate before dawn, watching. Lena's Civic rolled in exactly on time. She handed her ID to the guard, smiled politely. But Morrison wasn't watching her hands. He was watching her eyes. They never stopped moving. Constant scan, corners, shadows, patterns, counter-surveillance behavior. She wasn't watching the base. She was watching who was watching her. Morrison followed her. She walked with calm precision. Cleared corners, checked. Reflective surfaces. Used her offhand when bending down. Kept her dominant hand near her sidearm. No civilian contractor moved like that. Not unless she was trained. He waited until she was alone in the booth, then approached casually. "Miss Gray," he said, voice light. "Wanted to thank you. My guys got a real lesson yesterday." She looked up. There it was again. That flicker. That moment. Recognition. Hesitation, then gone. "Just doing my job, Commander." "Impressive shot. Where'd you train?" She smiled, pleasant, polite, but empty. "Army Reserve. Good marksmanship program." He didn't believe her, not even a little. I ran a background check. That got her attention. She set the pen down, slow, measured. "If you have concerns, I suggest speaking to my supervisor. Your supervisor doesn't know where you live." The silence hit like a trigger pull. She shifted just slightly, weight to the balls of her feet. "Fight or flight? I value my privacy." Most people do. Most people don't have fingerprints wiped from every federal system. He leaned forward. "That shot yesterday wasn't luck. I've seen it before. Delta, CIA, you don't shoot like that from a weekend course." Her face was still, expression unreadable. Finally, she said, "Some stones are better left unturned." He didn't flinch. "I'll keep digging." She paused at the door. "No, Commander, you won't. Because some ghosts are meant to stay buried." The next morning, Lena Gray was gone. No call, no sign. Just an empty booth and a supervisor who looked as confused as Morrison felt. Then the burner phone, the fake passports, the cash, all hidden behind her bathroom mirror. This wasn't someone running from something. This was someone prepared for everything. And yet, Morrison couldn't stop, couldn't let it go. Because deep down, he already knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Why would someone with that level of skill choose to disappear? It was the one question Morrison couldn't shake. 3 days had passed since Lena Gray vanished. Official response? Case closed. Higher-ups wanted it buried. No further investigation. Authorized, but Morrison couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her finger tightening on that trigger, saw the flags go slack, saw the impossible shot land center mass on a target no one else could touch. She wasn't just talented. She was trained, conditioned, made, and someone, somewhere, wanted that erased. He'd seen deep cover operatives before. Men and women didn't just live aliases. They became them. But Lena had done it too well. 8 months of obscurity, no friends, no routine outside of the range, no visible life. That wasn't hiding. That was waiting. He didn't know what for. Not yet, then. Came Tuesday, a day that began with handshakes, smiles, and political pageantry, and ended in blood. Senator Patricia Hawthorne, a senior Armed Services Committee member, had flown in for what was supposed to be a textbook goodwill visit. Toured the range, posed for cameras, praised the SEALs Morrison's team was assigned to. Light security, but just before 11 a.m., Chun's voice crackled over the radio from the control tower. "Commander, movement on the perimeter. Multiple vehicles, east side. Not on schedule," Morrison responded. "But base security, confirm approach." From Sector 4, nothing. Static. Repeat. Sector 4. Any eyes on? More silence. Then Chun again, this time sharper. "Base security not responding." "Sir, we've got a problem." Morrison's instincts flared like a siren in his chest. All units lock it down. Evacuate the senator, now. And then hell arrived. 3 black SUVs crashed through the east gate simultaneously. Out poured masked men in tactical gear, moving with the speed, clarity, and coordination of professionals. This wasn't some rogue militia. These were trained killers, suppressing. Fire shredded through the administration building. Walls cracked, windows imploded. Concrete coughed dust and blood. Rodriguez, cover fire. Chun, keep eyes high. Morrison led Hawthorne's team down a side corridor toward the secure bunker. But even as they moved, he knew they were losing ground. The attackers were too fast, too many, too well coordinated. And then, something shifted. The sound of gunfire. Cracked in a new rhythm, controlled, surgical, distant, but precise. One hostile dropped, then another, then 3 more in rapid succession. Each hit dead center, a sniper, a damn good one. Unknown marksman. This is SEAL-7 actual. Morrison called into the radio. Identify yourself. No answer. But another enemy collapsed in a fountain of red before he could breach the side hallway. Whoever was out there wasn't just shooting. They were protecting them. Rodriguez ducked. Next to Morrison behind a flipped desk, his breathing heavy. You seeing this? They're getting torn apart. Morrison checked his line of sight. That's when he saw her. Emerging from a maintenance tunnel near the vehicle bay fluid, silent, rifle steady. Lena Gray. But not Lena. Tactical gear, armor, a sidearm and cross-draw. Eyes like ice under pressure. She moved like a predator. Each shot was clean. Mechanical. No hesitation. Not the woman from the booth. This was someone else. The firefight didn't last long after that. With their numbers collapsing, the attackers tried to fall back. Morrison's team surged forward, pressing the advantage. But he couldn't take his eyes off her. She ejected a mag, reloaded mid-step. Movement pure muscle memory. She wasn't just defending herself. She was cleaning up when the last of the attackers lay still. Morrison lowered his weapon and approached. She turned. Her face was calm, but her eyes said everything. They weren't here for the senator, she said. They were here for me. He didn't question it. Who are you? He asked quietly. Lena hesitated. Then she gave a name that didn't belong on any file. Elena Vulov. The words hit like a recoil. I was born in Volgograd. Recruited by Russian military intelligence at 17. Spetsnaz, deep infiltration. Specialist. Morrison didn't respond, because part of him had already known. I spent 8 years working for the GRU, she continued, until I saw what I was really serving. The CIA turned you, in Prague, 3 years ago. Since then, I've fed them intel. Weapons networks, black market trade. I helped them dismantle Viktor Klov's arms empire. Morrison blinked. Viktor Klov, the arms dealer who lost billions in assets and half his network overnight. That was her? Klov's been hunting me ever since, she said. And now? He found me. So you faked your death. See, I staged it in Budapest. Elena Vulov died in a car bombing. Lena Gray was born the next day. She looked over the bodies, but they didn't buy it. Klov sent a death squad to finish the job. And they didn't come alone. Morrison frowned. You think this was just recon? She nodded grimly. Advance team. The real storm is coming. How many? She didn't answer at first. Then finally, her voice low. Enough to level this. Entire base. He looked at her. This woman he doubted, tracked, questioned. Now, she was their only hope. Elena. We need to evacuate, she interrupted. Already moving. Non-essential personnel. Now. You can't take this on alone. She turned, studied him. This isn't your fight. He took a breath. They attacked my base. They killed my men. That makes it our fight. For the first time. She hesitated. Commander, you don't know what you're signing up for. I don't care. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. Klov's not just coming to kill me. He's coming to send a message. Anyone who helps me dies. Morrison raised his weapon. Then we better make sure we're the ones left alive to tell it. Helicopters echoed in the distance, still faint. But Elena was already scanning the sky, and for the first time since the shooting stopped, she looked afraid, not for herself, for everyone else, because ghosts like her weren't supposed to leave shadows, and when they did, death followed. What kind of war needs to be hidden in plain sight? The kind no one's allowed to talk about. Morrison stood in the emergency command center, watching satellite imagery in real time as cold dread settled in his gut. Thermal signatures, dozens, moving fast, tight formations. 3 vectors, north, east, west. They were coming, and they weren't improvising. Rodriguez leaned over his shoulder, voice flat. They've got RPGs, mounted MGs, and that looks like a mortar team. Elena was already at the tactical display, her posture sharp, movements crisp. The civilian mask was gone. This wasn't Lena Gray anymore. This was Elena Vulov, former GEO operative. And for the first time, Morrison saw just how dangerous she really was. Klov's not playing games this time, she said, tracing approach routes with her finger. He's bringing his entire personal army. Morrison looked at her. The man in charge? Victor, his brother. Her tone was clipped. Former Spetsnaz colonel. Went private after the Soviet collapse. He trained me. Morrison felt the chill move up his spine. Your mentor is leading this attack? Elena nodded. Victor taught me everything I know, and he's the only one who knows about the scar on my left shoulder. From a training accident, he'll want proof. He's coming to see the body himself. The base's CO, Captain Reynolds, barged into the command room, eyes wide with panic. I've got orders to evacuate all non-essential personnel, but there's a problem. Nearest reinforcements are 4 hours out. Elena didn't even look up. We don't have 4 hours, she said. They'll be on us in 90 minutes. Reynolds froze. And what the hell do we do? Morrison stared at the board, the math staring back at him like a cruel joke. 7 SEALs, a few scattered base security guards, and her. Elena spoke before anyone else could. We turned the base into a trap. What kind of trap? Rodriguez asked, skeptical. She looked at him with those clear, calculating eyes. A maze. Morrison caught on fast. The urban warfare complex. Exactly. A full-scale training facility built to simulate every kind of combat scenario kill. Zones, breach houses, tunnels, blind corners, overwatch towers. And Elena had studied every inch of it. We control the environment, she said. Make them fight on our terms, Rodriguez muttered. We're going to take on 30-plus hostiles. With a few operators and hope? Elena turned calm cold. No, she said. We're going to make 30 hostiles chase ghosts into a labyrinth built to kill them. That's when things shifted. There was no more doubt in the room. Just action. The next hour was a blur, Morrison's. Team set charges, rigged fallback points, cached ammo where they'd need it. Every building in the training complex was transformed into a death trap. Elena orchestrated it all like a conductor guiding a violent symphony. Chun covered the observation tower. Rodriguez laid explosives along fallback corridors. Elena moved through the complex without maps, drawing ambush zones from memory. They barely finished when Elena called them into the central hub. They'll send recon first, she said. Small team, thermal and biometric targeting. They'll want to find me. How do we stop them from doing that? Morrison asked. Elena's mouth twitched into something like a smile. We give them exactly what they're looking for. At 1347, the first wave arrived. Morrison watched through the tower's thermal display as 6 men ghosted through the perimeter. Textbook movements, even spacing, cover discipline perfect. Too perfect. Elena's voice came through the comms. 3, 2, 1. The kill zone lit up. 3 clean shots. 3 bodies dropped. Explosives followed. The recon team didn't last 60 seconds. Phase 1 complete, Morrison called in. Recon neutralized. But Victor Klov didn't rise to power by being Predictable. The second wave adjusted, instantly splitting into fire teams, flanking wide. Probing for weaknesses, Alina tracked them on the displays, murmuring quiet observations. He's reading the terrain, adjusting patterns, using my training. Against me, and still. The defenders held. Building by building, the attackers were bled dry. Chun sniped from impossible angles. Rodriguez detonated 3 more traps. Morrison himself dropped a squad from a concealed staircase. Each death slowed them, but not enough. Victor was adapting faster than Elena expected. He began to herd them, not clear them. Wait, Morrison said, catching the shift. They're not sweeping us. They're pushing us. Toward the central courtyard. Elena's face went pale. Victor knows about the tower, she breathed. He's trying to force an endgame, right here. They didn't have time to reposition. Explosions rocked the buildings around them. The tower shook. Smoke filled the lower levels. Morrison knew what was coming before the radio crackled. Courtyard secure, came the voice, Russian accented. Loud, confident, broadcast on every open frequency. Elena Vulov, it called, "Come out, or your friends die." She closed her eyes, silent calculation. This wasn't just an assault. This was personal. "I'm going out there," she said, rising. "Like hell you are." Morrison snapped. "We hold. We finish this together." She looked at him, and for the first time, her voice was gentle. "This was always going to end with me." He stepped forward, grabbed her arm. "There has to be another way." "There is," she whispered. "But it needs you to trust me. One more time." She keyed the open channel. "Victor." "I'm coming." His reply was smooth. "Of course. Little Elena. Just like old times." She stepped into the courtyard, alone, hands at her sides, calm, controlled. Victor emerged, 6 men flanking him. Older, scarred, but with the same eyes Elena remembered. "You've led me a long chase. It ends now," she replied. "Show me the scar." Without hesitation, she pulled down her left sleeve. The training scar. Victor nodded. "Time to come home." Her eyes met his. "I am." "Home." He twitched toward his weapon, but she was faster. The knife flashed like lightning embedded in his throat before he cleared leather. He staggered, choked. His men raised rifles, but they never got the chance. 7 shadows and 7 windows pulled. Triggers as one. Morrison's team had never left the buildings. It was the final ambush, 1 shot each. Victor's squad dropped like cut marionettes. And then there was silence. Elena stood alone in the open, surrounded by bodies, and still breathing. How many names can one person live under before forgetting who they really are? As the sun dipped behind the rocky Nevada ridges, painting the courtyard in burnt gold and blood-red hues, Morrison stood at the edge of it all, watching her. Elena Vulov, Lena Gray. The woman who had silenced an entire SEAL unit with 1 shot. The woman who had now silenced the ghosts chasing her. She moved among the fallen with no ceremony. Stripped gear, checked weapons, picked up a radio that hadn't even finished broadcasting. Its last screen, tactical cleanup, methodical, clinical. But behind her precision, Morrison could sense something heavier. She wasn't collecting tools. She was burying lives. His boots echoed across the stone as he stepped into the courtyard. "I didn't know you carried a blade," he said softly. She didn't look at him. "Everyone carries something sharp. The trick is knowing when to use it." Morrison looked around at the bodies, and when not to, she finally met his eyes. "I never wanted to use it here." He nodded. There were no right words, no congratulations, no relief, only breath and memory, and the knowledge that whatever storm she'd just survived, another one was forming. Was it worth it? He asked. Her face was unreadable. "Victor was the last person alive who could confirm who I really am. Now there's no one left." She turned toward the smoke-stained buildings that had protected them. "I can finally disappear. For real this time." But Morrison shook his head. "That's not what you came back for. You could have run." "You didn't," She paused. There it was again, that flicker, something between duty and longing. I stayed, she said slowly, because you were right. This base, these people, they weren't my fight. Until they were. She looked down at Victor's body. He taught me how to kill, but he never taught me how to live. The silence stretched again, soft, fragile. Morrison broke it. The CIA knows you're alive now. I know, and they'll come calling. They already did, she said, almost smiling. This morning before the attack, blocked call, modulated voice. Stop digging, Commander Morrison. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. His jaw tightened. And you still stayed. I don't run from every ghost, she said. Just the ones I used to be. By nightfall, the compound had returned to a strange kind of order. Recovery teams were on site. Black SUVs from the Department of Defense parked in rows outside the command center. There, tinted windows hiding whatever shadows arrived inside them. Morrison watched through a second-story window as a clean-cut man in civilian clothing stepped out, sunglasses still on despite the darkness. He didn't look around, didn't hesitate. CIA, he knew the type. They didn't knock, didn't wait. They walked into secured zones like they belonged. By the time the agent reached the ops room, Eleanor was already there, waiting. He offered no greeting, just a file. New assignment, your cover's intact. Everyone who matters believes Lena Gray neutralized a hostile threat and died in the crossfire, Morrison scoffed. And the fact she's very much alive? The man didn't blink. Is above your clearance. He turned to Elena. Lamley's offering you a choice. She didn't speak. You disappear again, or you come back in, this time, above board, training special ops teams in unconventional warfare. Morrison felt a weight settle on the moment. This was it, the end of Lena Gray, the birth of something else. Elena took the file, flipped through the first few pages. Black ink, coordinates, names, places no one was ever supposed to see. She closed it. I'll think about it. The agent nodded once, already turning away. We expect an answer in 24 hours. As he left, Morrison leaned against the map table. What do you want, Elena? Really? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out the window. The desert wind kicked dust over the courtyard. The same place she had ended it all. The same place she had begun something else. I want... She began, then stopped. Morrison waited. Finally, her voice softened. I want to stop surviving and start belonging somewhere. He nodded. We've got space on the team. She smiled gently. After today, I think you've got everything you need. He stepped closer. That's not what I asked. She looked at him. For once, not calculating, not preparing for betrayal, just honest. I don't know yet, she whispered, but I want to find out. 2 days later, Morrison watched as she stood alone at the edge of the training complex. No weapon, no gear, just wind. She had chosen to stay, not as Lena Gray, not as Elena Vulov, just as herself, and whatever that meant next, she was going to write it herself. As the sun set behind her, casting a long shadow across the ground, Morrison finally understood. She hadn't come to Fallon to hide. She'd come to remember, and when ghosts remember who they are, they stop running and start fighting for something again. How do you teach war to people who've only trained for it? That was the question Elena faced now, not as a spy, not as a sniper, but as a ghost trying to become human again. Fallon had quieted, rebuilt. The courtyard where bodies once fell was now swept clean. The scorch marks faded beneath fresh layers of paint and memory. A few new recruits passed through its corridors now, unaware of what had been fought and won beneath their boots, but some of them, just a few, had heard whispers about a woman who made one impossible shot and disappeared into history like a rumor. They didn't know her name. They just called her the Phantom Instructor. She never raised her voice, never bragged, and never missed. Elena stood at the edge of a private firing range, watching a trainee breathed too fast behind the scope of a suppressed Mk13 Mod 7 rifle. "Your heart's in your throat," she said, calm. "That's why you're missing." The young man flinched. "Sorry, ma'am." "Don't apologize. Listen to your body. You're not just pulling a trigger. You're making a decision, life or death." He nodded. "You can't do that if your mind is loud." He exhaled, settled. The next shot rang true. She didn't smile, just moved on. Another student, another posture correction. Another calm word in a voice that carried years of killing wrapped in silence. But inside she wasn't calm. Not really, because for all the clarity of war, peace was harder. She could teach them how to shoot, how to hide, how to read wind like a language, but she couldn't teach them how to carry the weight afterward. Not yet. She was still learning that herself. That night, she sat alone in the barracks she'd chosen to stay in, no longer hiding in off-base apartments or mirrored closets. Just four walls, a bed, a photo of nothing, and silence until the knock came. Morrison. She opened the door without a word. He held 2 coffees. "I figured one of us could pretend this was normal," he said. She stepped aside to let him in. He sat. She didn't. "New batch of trainees are saying your sniper class is tougher than Ranger School. They talk too much." He smiled. "Yeah, but they listen." She leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "I don't want to be anyone's legend." "You're not. You're their standard now." She looked away. "You think I'm building something here," she said quietly. "But I'm still dismantling what I used to be." Morrison sipped his coffee. "That's the point, isn't it?" She raised an eyebrow. "You show them how to win," he said, "while you figure out how to live." Later that week, the CIA came calling again. This time, in person, same agent, same blank stare, same offer, only now with urgency. There's movement in Moldova. A GRU cell resurfaced under new leadership. "We think they're planning an extraction." Elena listened, not blinking. "They're looking for someone," he continued. "Someone with your training. Someone who should be dead." She nodded once. "Victor's people?" "His replacements," the agent replied. "His legacy." "Then they're looking in the wrong place." The agent leaned forward. "We want you to go back under. Just for this op. Infiltrate. Confirm identities. Ghost in, ghost out." Morrison stepped in from the doorway. "She's not yours to order around." The agent didn't look at him. "Elena, we can't make you. But you know how few people can do this job. This isn't revenge. It's preemption." Elena stood still for a long time and finally asked one question. "If I say no, who takes my place?" Silence, and that was her answer. The next morning, she walked into the range as usual. Same boots, same ball cap, same emotionless face. But Morrison could feel the shift. She didn't say anything at first. She just handed him a slip of paper, coordinates, a name, an exit date. "How long will you be gone?" "As long as it takes. Are you ready?" She looked at him, then really looked. "No, but I'm done waiting to be." He nodded. There was nothing left to say. She turned to go, but before she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Lena." She paused. "Come back." She didn't look back, but her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. "I'm not leaving. Just remembering." And then she was gone. She arrived in Moldova 3 nights later under a different name, a different face, but the same eyes. Cold, focused, ready. It was like stepping back into a version of herself that had never left. Old skills returned. With terrifying ease, infiltration routes, facial tells, silent takedowns. Her hands remembered what her soul had tried to forget. She became what they needed her to be, and yet there was a difference now. She wasn't following orders. She was setting her own. The mission was short, sharp, and devastatingly effective. She identified the cell, confirmed their reach, and eliminated their ability to operate quietly, permanently. But the final kill didn't come with a bullet. It came with a whisper, A warning passed through Gru channels in the shadows of Europe. The ghost is alive, and she's no longer yours. What do you do when your shadow follows you into the light? Elena had returned, but not the way ghosts usually did. Not to haunt, not to disappear, but to stay. To face what came next, and what came next was silence, no missions, no intel drops, no whispers in her earpiece. The architect had vanished, along with his networks, and for the first time in years, there was nothing left to chase. No orders, no enemies, just the unsettling quiet of survival. She found herself waking up before sunrise, not out of necessity, but because the habit refused to die. Muscle memory without a mission. At 0530, she'd make coffee. At 0600, she'd clean a rifle she hadn't used in weeks, and then she'd sit and think about the girl born in Volgrad, a soldier made in silence, the woman forged through betrayal, desertion, rebirth, and the strange ache of not knowing what it meant to belong now that she finally could. It was Morrison who broke the quiet, not with orders or questions, but with a simple gesture. He invited her to speak to his team. No pressure, no requirement, just a quiet, unfinished sentence. You don't have to tell them everything, but maybe give them something they can carry. She said nothing at the time, but that night, she stood alone in the middle of the empty range, the desert wind tugging at her collar, and she remembered what Morrison had once told her. You can't carry it all alone forever. So she didn't the next morning. SEAL Team 7 gathered in the training room, joking under their breath like always, but quieter when she walked in. Rodriguez gave a respectful nod. Chun shifted, expectant. Elena didn't. Walk to the front. She stood at the edge of the room. No lectern, no notes, no rank. Just a story. I wasn't born to do this, she began. Not loud, not soft, just honest. I didn't grow up dreaming of uniforms or rifles. My country chose that path for me, and I followed because I didn't know what else to be. They sat still, listening. This wasn't a story from a manual. This was a truth few ever heard. I became someone else, over and over again. Learned to disappear in plain sight, to mimic, adapt, manipulate. She paused, letting the quiet hang heavy, and then I learned how to kill. Even Rodriguez didn't. Move now. Elena looked down for a moment. When I changed sides, they called it betrayal. But I didn't betray my past, I just stopped letting it own me. She looked at each of them, not with command, but with connection. If you're lucky, you'll walk away from this life with your body intact. But your soul, that's harder. No one teaches you how to come home. Her voice grew quieter. So when you do come home, don't carry silence like a shield. Talk, feel, be human, or you'll become a ghost before your time. No one applauded. She wouldn't have wanted that. But they stood quietly, one by one, and nodded, like soldiers acknowledging a fallen comrade. Except she hadn't fallen. She'd survived. That night, Elena returned to the tower, not to watch for threats, but to write. A notebook she'd kept blank since Prague sat on her lap now. The pen moved slowly at first, then steadily. She didn't write about kills. She didn't record missions. She wrote about the wind, the stillness before a shot, the moment you decide not to pull the trigger, and the silence that comes after both. One entry stood out. She wrote it just before dawn. I was made to be silent. I became a ghost to survive, but I was never meant to vanish. I was meant to endure, to witness, and maybe to teach others how not to become what I did. When Morrison saw her the next morning, he noticed something different. Not in her posture, not in her tone, in her eyes. Less glass, more light. She handed him the notebook. Not for you, she said. For the next one, he understood. The CIA contacted her again, this time with hesitation. No missions, no demands, just a question. Would she help build something? A program, quiet, off the books, to train operatives not just to fight, but to live afterward. To return home, she thought about it for 3 days, then answered with a single word. Yes, but under one condition. No more ghosts, just people. The program didn't have a name. It didn't need one. It lived behind closed doors, in places no one could find on maps, and the first recruit walked in with scars behind his smile and fear behind his silence. He saluted her. She didn't salute back. Instead, she said, "Put the rank down, sit. Tell me who you are." Before the war told you, and he did, for the first time in years. They said legends disappear when their war is over, but Elena Volov didn't. She stayed, and what she built was not a legacy of violence, but a shelter for those who still carried it. What do you do when your shadow follows you into the light? Elena had returned, but not the way ghosts usually did. Not to haunt, not to disappear, but to stay, to face what came next, and what came next was silence, no missions, no intel drops, no whispers in her earpiece. The architect had vanished, along with his networks, and for the first time in years, there was nothing left to chase. No orders, no enemies, just the unsettling quiet of survival. She found herself waking up before sunrise, not out of necessity, but because the habit refused to die. Muscle memory without a mission. At 0530, she'd make coffee. At 0600, she'd clean a rifle she hadn't used in weeks, and then she'd sit and think about the girl born in Volgrad, the soldier made in silence, the woman forged through betrayal, desertion, rebirth, and the strange ache of not knowing what it meant to belong now that she finally could. It was Morrison who broke the quiet, not with orders or questions, but with a simple gesture. He invited her to speak to his team. No pressure, no requirement, just a quiet, unfinished sentence. You don't have to tell them everything, but maybe give them something they can carry. She said nothing at the time, but that night, she stood alone in the middle of the empty range, the desert wind tugging at her collar, and she remembered what Morrison had once told her. You can't carry it all alone forever. So she didn't. The next morning, SEAL Team 7 gathered in the training room, joking under their breath like always, but quieter when she walked in. Rodriguez gave a respectful nod. Chun shifted, expectant. Elena didn't. Walked to the front. She stood at the edge of the room, no lectern, no notes, no rank, just a story. I wasn't born to do this, she began. Not loud, not soft, just honest. I didn't grow up dreaming of uniforms or rifles. My country chose that path for me, and I followed because I didn't know what else to be. They sat still, listening. This wasn't a story from a manual. This was a truth few ever heard. I became someone else, over and over again. Learned to disappear in plain sight, to mimic, adapt, manipulate. She paused, letting the quiet hang heavy. And then I learned how to kill. Even Rodriguez didn't. Move now. Elena looked down for a moment. When I changed sides, they called it betrayal. But I didn't betray my past. I just stopped letting it own me. She looked at each of them, not with command, but with connection. If you're lucky, you'll walk away from this life with your body intact. But your soul, that's harder. No one teaches you how to come home. Her voice grew quieter. So when you do come home, don't carry silence like a shield. Talk, feel, be human. Or you'll become a ghost before your time. No one applauded. She wouldn't have wanted that. But they stood, quietly, one by one, and nodded, like soldiers acknowledging a fallen comrade. Except she hadn't fallen, she'd survived. That night, Elena returned to the tower, not to watch for threats, but to write. A notebook she'd kept blank since Prague sat on her lap now. The pen moved slowly at first, then steadily. She didn't write about kills. She didn't record missions. She wrote about the wind, the stillness before a shot, the moment you decide not to pull the trigger, and the silence that comes after both. One entry stood out. She wrote it just before dawn. I was made to be silent. I became a ghost to survive. But I was never meant to vanish. I was meant to endure, to witness, and maybe to teach others how not to become what I did. When Morrison saw her the next morning, he noticed something different, not in her posture, not in her tone, in her eyes. Less glass, more light. She handed him the notebook. "Not for you," she said. For the next one, he understood. The CIA contacted her again, this time with hesitation. No missions, no demands, just a question. Would she help build something? A program, quiet, off the books, to train operatives not just to fight, but to live afterward, to return whole. She thought about it for 3 days, then answered with a single word. Yes, but under one condition. No more ghosts, just people. Program didn't have a name. It didn't need one. It lived behind closed doors, in places no one could find on maps. And the first recruit walked in with scars behind his smile and fear behind his silence. He saluted her. She didn't salute back. Instead, she said, "Put the rank down, sit, tell me who you are." Before the war told you, and he did, for the first time in years. They said legends disappear when their war is over, but Elena Vulov didn't. She stayed, and what she built was not a legacy of violence, but a shelter for those who still carried it. When is a war truly over? Not when the gunfire stops, not when the mission ends. A war ends when the person who carried it learns to put it down. Elena walked the outer edge of Fallon one last time, boots silent on the packed dirt trail. Cold morning air biting just enough to remind her she was alive. She stopped near the range, same spot where she'd fired the shot that changed everything. 800 yards, crosswind, desert heat, and the quiet breath before the trigger broke. That moment wasn't just a shot. It was a choice. The choice to stop hiding, to speak through action, to say, "I'm still here." And now, months later, she wasn't just here. She was needed. Morrison found her standing by the rusted fence overlooking the File. Eastern Valley. He didn't say anything at first, just stood beside her. "You leaving today?" he finally asked. She nodded. "The program's operational, first cycle is complete, and it needs more than my shadow standing over it." He glanced at her. "It needs you." "No," she said softly. "It needs what I learned." She looked at him then, not as a commander, not as a handler, but as someone who had stayed through every quiet turning. "I'm not a weapon anymore, Morrison. I'm not a warning." "You're a survivor," he said. "I'm a witness," she corrected. "And that means I have a responsibility." "To who?" She glanced back toward the base. "To the ones still fighting when the mission ends. The ones no one debriefs." A pause then. "To myself." At the helipad, Rodriguez waited with her bag, not the old one, patched and battered and filled with old war, a new one, lighter, simpler. She nodded to him. "You're not good at goodbyes," he said. "No one in my line ever was." Still, he shrugged. "You were more than just a legend around here." "I wasn't a legend," she replied. "I was a ghost. Not anymore." They didn't hug. They didn't need to. As the rotor spun, as the wind kicked up desert sand and memory alike, Elena climbed into the bird with no fanfare, no final salute, just quiet. And Morrison, watching from below, knew what she'd left behind wasn't the story. It was permission. Permission for others. To feel, to speak, to not carry it alone. Weeks later, a new instructor walked into the quiet facility hidden deep in Colorado, where Elena's program had finally found a home. The woman was younger, still shaking, still not sure if she wanted to be there. She didn't wear rank, didn't carry a rifle, but she carried something heavier, a name, a past, and the unbearable question of whether she'd ever feel human again. The lead trainer welcomed her with a small nod. "First rule," the woman said, "you don't owe us your story." The recruit blinked. "Second rule," the trainer continued, "but you deserve to tell it when you're ready." And then the trainer opened a box inside, a simple black notebook. Blank, clean, and on the first page, a single line written in a hand shaped by war, but softened by truth. Sometimes, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Somewhere far. From war zones and concrete compounds, Elena sat beside a small fire, tucked in a forest retreat where cell signals didn't reach. She had no rifle in hand, only tea, only breath, only stillness, and a memory of the woman she once had to be. That woman had served her purpose. And now, it was Elena's turn to live, not as a phantom, not as a file in a sealed cabinet, but as proof that survival is not silence, and that ghosts don't just haunt. They teach, they guide, they choose. Because sometimes, the most dangerous person on the battlefield isn't the one who can kill without hesitation. It's the one who learns when not to, and walks away, still whole, still standing, still here.